Hey, before we get started with the video, I just wanted to make a quick announcement. I know that there was at least a few of you who were interested in my thoughts on I Divine Cybermancy's sort of spiritual successor, Necromunda Hired Gun. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen anymore. In light of recent stances taken by Games Workshop in regard to fan works and the subsequent fallout to the animator community, I will not be covering any games related to Games Workshop franchises, nor will I be buying them for my personal enjoyment unless this stance is permanently and verifiably reversed. It's a bummer, I know, but we creators have to look out for each other and vote with our channels when we can. Now on to the video. That was a lovely vacation. I spent a whole lot of time playing Yakuza 0, I caught up on some reading, and just sort of recharged my batteries, you know? Let's see what's been going on in the gaming world since I've been away. What? XCOM is now a mobile game? Whatever, it's a side grid. They had a XCOM mobile game before, right? That was pretty good. It's a blatant ripoff of a freemium predatory game that overspends on YouTube? Okay, that's alarming, but it's not like XCOM 2 is gonna disappear. A writer at Kotaku editorialized their headline while talking about this? Holy moly, we have to discuss this right now! Okay, so about that article. While I admittedly failed my intro to journalism class back in my first run at community college, ironically enough because I was playing a ton of XCOM Enemy Unknown and neglecting responsibilities, even I know that you're not supposed to be editorializing your titles when you're doing journalism. However, being the research fiend I am, I went and did the unthinkable and actually read the article. And I gotta say, XCOM Legends don't look too good. Mr. Plinkett, no, not that one, makes a lot of good points about how this new XCOM title was launched unannounced to only the EU market and was made by a studio that's so no-name their website doesn't even have any info on them and is almost as far from XCOM as you can get, barring one game. Editorializing aside, which was later fixed, it's a solid article that does a good job of explaining to you how much of an uh-oh this game is and providing further material such as gameplay videos someone scrounged up, which I went through a few of them and I have to admit I did not like what I see. So while I have no first-hand experience with XCOM Legends owing to how I'm in the wrong region to download it and I'm not about to go put some sketchy APK on my phone to see exactly what someone uploaded for me. The game is made by one Iridium Starfish who have no previous games to speak of, don't even appear in the game anywhere to the point where I almost mistook a YouTuber's watermark as a logo for the developer, and what I'm assuming is their official website just has a splash image of their logo the last time I checked it. So the first big yikes of this game is that it entirely disregards XCOM 2. It seems to have a similar storyline to XCOM 2 with humanity losing during Enemy Unknown and then Advent's rise to power, but now you're recruiting the Legends of XCOM instead of being the Resistance. Central, Taigen, Shen's daughter, and a few others are still there, but all your troops are these weird hero characters and there are no tactics whatsoever. Okay, according to the videos I scrounged up, you can't time out your hero abilities and what have you and move your dudes around, but calling that strategy is like calling that stuff in the frozen food aisle garlic bread. To make matters worse, it's very obviously aping another game, which we'll get into in a sec. From the outset, this looks extremely freemium. Now, I understand that mobile games aren't exactly able to charge a cover fee or have a paid expansion like a traditional computer game does, but this one looks like it's one of the many that's monetization first and design later. I base this how at the end of every mission, you get at least 2 different kinds of currency plus XP, which can be used like on different legends, like to level them up, plus a whole lot of thingies that look like there's some kind of crafting thing. And all your upgrades, or at least the majority of what I saw, I did not see any other way people obtained them, everything seems to be obtained through loot boxes or recycling stuff to get more loot boxes. You get heroes through random chance in what they call the Archway, and of course, they're tiered for usefulness. As for design being second, the combat looks as if it's designed to be played on mental autopilot, and I'm fairly certain that the images they use for Taigen, Central, and Shen are all cutouts of screenshots from XCOM 2, or at least all the avatars they use during their cutscenes seem to have like some sort of different lighting on them for some reason, or maybe it's just, it looks wonky. So yeah, if you haven't figured it out yet, this is very much ripping off the format of that which shall not be named on this channel. To make matters worse, it's in vertical too. I'm already pretty gun shy about mobile games that are not Pokemon Go, and even then, I don't get too involved because the community is pitching a fit over losing bonuses that were never meant to be permanent so they can no longer play from their cars. Look, I know it's more complicated than that, but since the range nerf, I've had no problem hitting all my stops while maintaining social distancing, and I've only had problems if I'm trying to spin a stop from like across the street from wherever the thing is. Tangent aside, what if I told you that this is not nearly the worst thing to happen to XCOM, or not? Let me tell you about the XCOM dark times, and then I'll tell you about the real worst XCOM game ever. So a long time before the first Aoyama was uttered, everything was going nicely over at Microprose, making the XCOM franchise with UFO, Terror from the Deep, and Apocalypse. Until it wasn't. Hasbro, in all their wisdom, saw that the computer game market was a growing scene and decided that they were going to do what all the big companies did and buy up a bunch of smaller companies and the rights to their franchises rather than try and make their own from the ground up. This is what happened to XCOM in 1998, just as they were finishing up the not so XCOM but certainly very interesting XCOM Interceptor. I made a video a while back about all the XCOM games if you want to hear more about that one. Oh geez, that video is so old it doesn't even have War of the Chosen in it because it wasn't out yet. The Hasbro era was certainly a disaster for the XCOM franchise, in which the worst entries in the series were released, but it wasn't all clueless megacorp pushing for soulless games. Between the time that Hasbro bought out the XCOM rights in '98 to when they decided not to buy them back after subletting them out to Infogrames in 2005, Hasbro-COM attempted to make 4 games under the XCOM label. 2 of them were cancelled. One was a play-by-email remake of the first game, which and we'll get to the namesake of this video in just a moment. Now, while the games we saw come to market from Hasbro-COM were hot garbage, Hasbro wasn't entirely a malicious evil corporation trying to ruin your favorite franchise cause they're meanies. The devs behind the Hasbro XCOM games, mainly Microprose Chapel Hill, which is now a Hasbro company, had some really ambitious ideas such as XCOM Genesis, a reimagining of the original game featuring a fully 3D engine that was going to be built from the ground up on a foundation of direct 3D to straddle the awkward place PC gaming was presently in, where not everyone had a dedicated GPU yet, so most 3D stuff had to be capable of being ran on software alone. Genesis was fairly far along with tons of concept art, tech trees, and even a working vertical slice of a demo to show how the game would work, but unfortunately the project got cancelled as part of a cost-cutting measure as things weren't going so well for Hasbro's game department as a whole, and that whole build a 3D engine from the ground up thing is not exactly a cheap process. The second major project that didn't make it was actually something that the original Microprose shelved as they felt it wasn't the time, but Hasbro was more than happy to put their weight behind it. XCOM Alliance. Alliance was supposed to be a story about how the world got to the point it was between Terror from the Deep and Apocalypse, and explain how humanity was eventually able to tech up into a spacefaring society, as you were a part of a team that was sent to survey the Mars base that the A's had back in the first game to find new tech and prospect for Illyrium. Surprise, surprise, that base wasn't as inactive as we thought it was, and eventually you and yours get sucked through a portal and end up forming a namesake alliance with another race of aliens that are at odds with the guys who invaded Earth. Alliance was meant to be a squad-based shooter with a lot of equipment customization and tactics, which frankly looked really cool. Hasbro spurred Chapel Hill Microprose to start working on Alliance again after Genesis wasn't working out, and they were hoping to release the game by the end of 2001. However, a lead dev suddenly left the studio and the game had to be scrapped because what this dev did was something that no one else could do at the time, leaving only the B team that was working on another game. They've never said who exactly this dev was in official releases, but a few people believe that it was one person or another. It should be noted too, real quick before we get into the anti-sponsor, that there actually is a leaked build of XCOM Alliance that you can find floating around the internet and download, but I personally had a lot of trouble getting it running because it ran on a very old version of Unreal Engine that needed a lot of bootstrapping and finagling since incomplete game. So, while it was pretty cool that I was able to find cool sponsors for Halloween in July, I think it's time we got back to our roots and did an anti-sponsor. Now, normally I don't even consider today's anti-sponsor worthy of the segment, as I felt that using them would be kind of cheating, but today I'm going to tell you about one of their saucier antics to get into my inbox today, as I think they've earned it. Now, I normally have the terms Raid, Shadow, and Legend set to be filtered to spam if they're within the same sentence of an email. One got through recently, and I even ended up opening it. Now, normally I don't give this so-called great new game that is a dumbed-down version of previous concepts with tons of unique, asterisk, heroes the time of day. However, the company that publishes this game uses multiple ad agencies to court deals, since it's kind of known now that the game is so heavily monetized it borders on predatory, and I've personally known someone who got Skinner box out of $1,000 from that game. So it's pretty bad faith to take their money and shill it to your fans, as it's common knowledge the game is not something to be associated with if you want a good reputation. So why did I open this email then? It's because they lied about being another sponsor in the subject line. I kid you not, the agency straight up made their subject line as if they were another sponsor, and when I opened it, it was a full-on pitch for everyone's least favorite sponsor on YouTube. I did my due diligence too and checked to see if this was merely an error on the firm's part, but after looking into the firm, it seems they had no association with the VPN service in the subject line, and the VPN service had no associations with the PR firm on their website. So I decided to be a Boy Scout and forwarded the email to the PR team of the VPN service to give them a heads up that their name and likeness was being used to try and get people to open emails for another company's product, and then blocked emails from the offending PR firm. I will never, ever take money from terrible and predatory mobile games like this one, because I get support from all of you over at patreon.com/charlatanwonder, where you get early access to videos, can vote on what videos come next, ask questions for the monthly Q&As, and even get VIP access to game and movie nights. If you can or won't support the channel, that's cool. I'll still try to best to make the best videos that I can and hopefully earn your patronage later. Now, let's get back to what is easily the worst game in the XCOM franchise. Okay, I've put this off for long enough. We gotta talk about XCOM Enforcer now. Enforcer was a side project made by Hasbro's B team that was never meant to take the spotlight, and frankly, probably shouldn't have carried the XCOM name in the first place, but they had to do something with their IP rights they paid good money for, and so far they had released nothing but that play-by-email game that wasn't exactly the smash hit among the XCOM fandom they wanted. XCOM Enforcer is effectively the anti-XCOM, and easily the worst game in the franchise, as even if it wasn't flying in the face of everything we knew as XCOM, was still a poorly made game that left me frustrated before, during, and after playing it. Alright, so first off, the core game of Enforcer, you know how like the XCOM franchise is known for its turn-based tactics where you carefully position your units into covered vantage points where they'll have enough time units left to get a good shot off at the A's? Yeah, we're gonna be doing exactly none of that here. Enforcer is a third-person action shooter where you play as this robot that's called Enforcer, and unfortunately, this was before Resident Evil 4 when game designers figured out that if the player character is off-center on the screen, then the player can see what's going on. To make matters worse, it's this really bad pre-RE4 camera where you're kind of like above the character and there's no way to control where the camera goes. And I tried with mouse aiming, but I just couldn't figure it out. And I'm ruling out controllers here too, as Enforcer was released before wide support for controllers was a thing on PC. Like they still existed, but in the early 2000s, PC games were not nearly as controller friendly are now. So that means that you are stuck with this terrible, overly closed in camera angle where you can hardly see anything while playing unless you jump or during certain segments, which makes it an absolute pain to figure out what is around you and where you need to go. Then there's the other core tenet of XCOM, the research. You still do research in Enforcer, sorta. Instead of recruiting scientists and picking which projects you should allocate members of your team to, you just buy weapon upgrades in a post-level menu. There's not even that much inspired from like salvage alien tech or from your understanding of how the aliens operate. It's just a basic suite of shooter weapons that you'd find in pretty much any other late 90s, early 2000s shooter game. The best part is that the research is now done when you kill enemies. It just explodes out of them as a bunch of multicolored PNG files. And it doesn't help that on top of the lame and hard to see gameplay, the gutted research system that reminds you of what kind of game you wanted to be playing, that Enforcer is pretty lame. It seems like someone in development thought Enforcer would be the coolest thing, but all he does is occasionally say lame catchphrases like some sort of off-brand action hero, while he's strafing or rolling into enemies that you didn't know were there thanks to the camera. It's never satisfying to control Enforcer, and you just question why the weirdo scientist who keeps a bunch of softcore posters in his lab decided that Enforcer needed to say all these things, which maybe that question just answered itself. And if that wasn't enough for you, everything about this game is uninspired at best and otherwise outright terrible. The levels are an uninspired trip across the country to a bunch of popular landmarks and then you go to hell for some reason. The weapons, as previously mentioned, are uninspired generic shooter weapons. The enemies are just vague shapes that you wouldn't know are actually the enemies from previous games if it weren't for their names occasionally showing up. Level exploration begins and ends at collecting the letters S, K, A, T, and E, and if you get them all, you get to go to a bonus level that's a poorly implemented knockoff of a classic game with Enforcer's engine, where you can get a few extra research points if you're lucky. Frankly, I'd be entirely unsurprised if at one point Enforcer wasn't even supposed to be an XCOM game, but when Hasbro saw that the other projects weren't going so well, they made it one after the core design had already been done, even if it wasn't an XCOM game at all. I don't even think that would have made it much better. If anything, if it wasn't an XCOM game, it'd probably just be released to no fanfare and be forgotten by the time we got to this point in the timeline. After Enforcer released to some very mixed reviews with fans of the XCOM franchise disavowing it, Hasbro and Infogrames just sat on the property for the next 4.5 years until Hasbro decided to buy back the rights to the game franchises they previously sold to Infogrames, but opted not to buy XCOM. Lucky for us, Take-Two pulled up, bought the rights to XCOM, and passed them off to Firaxis, who eventually made XCOM Enemy Unknown, which did an excellent job in reviving the series. Okay, I know this has all been a lot to take in, as this is likely the first you've heard of XCOM Legends, and I'm very sorry to be the one to break the news to you, but this is certainly not the end of XCOM or even the beginning of the end. This is most likely the boneheaded move of some suit that wanted to move in on that great new game YouTubers who don't care about their audience have been playing, without realizing that said game is artificially propped up by an absurd amount of advertising and not nearly as popular on its own merit. I doubt we'll see too many repercussions against the XCOM franchise as a whole when things like this fizzle out. Heck, they didn't even bother to advertise this mobile game, so I'm thinking this might have more been on the experimental side, just to see if it would work. I'd say that if anything, it's a very good sign that Firaxis has no involvement in this so-called XCOM title, as it likely means that they're gearing up for a mainline series, hopefully an XCOM one. Take-Two did recently announce that they're going to reveal 2 new major games soon. I even heard the word XCOM being passed around. Wait a minute. Marvel XCOM? No, you can't do this to me again, Disney. I won't let you. No, was Deus Ex not enough? Please do not do this. We are all in hell. I'm not going to say that the same transition from bad game at launch to good game eventually is applicable here like I did about Fallout 76 in the Brotherhood of Steel video, as the core of XCOM Legends is fundamentally about being a freemium game, which is a lot harder to turn around if anyone actually wants to turn it around at all. I think that it's better that we just wait for the next installment of the XCOM franchise, and in the meantime, replay War of the Chosen and Chimera Squad, which I will one day get around to booting up and playing to see how it is. XCOM Legends is bad, but stuff like Enforcer shows us just how bad it can get and makes us thank our lucky stars that we are where we are. That's gonna do her for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. I hope that someday I'll be able to win over your patronage. Speaking of XCOM, I've also been streaming a heavily modded playthrough of XCOM 2 War of the Chosen, which I've been meaning to get back into now that I'm off vacation, so look forward to us finally liberating Brazil through the power of Shrek. In the meantime, stay safe, stay hydrated, make sure to wear sunscreen when you gotta go out, and enjoy this cat video. Saucy boy, could you please get off of Mommy's art desk? I have something for you from the farmer's market. It's cat grass. It's got your name on it. Oh, would you like to come down here and have a sniffy? Oh yes. I'm just gonna leave this here for you. And if you're a good kitty, there is much more where that came from. Probably would help a lot to get some greens in your diet. Are you pleased with this offering? No, don't go back on top of... No!